this case is gripping your country, it's gripping the world, really. Tell us firstly about these women who had been missing in many cases for years.
Well, the 4 women that we're talking about were all called escorts working off Craigslist. They were all between the ages of 22 and 27. They were small, petite women. They were willing to go to strangers' homes, get in cars with strangers. So they were working in a high-risk occupation. And each of them ended up being murdered, strangled, and bound in burlap and dumped along a highway.
There was criticism, was there not, of authorities not doing enough to try and solve these cases?
There was criticism. I did not follow that press. My expertise is in criminology, so I did not follow what was going on with the criticism of the police.
Right. So when did Rex Heuermann become a suspect?
He became a suspect about a year ago when police were looking at burner phones and the patterns of where they were being found with cell towers, and his appearance. He looked like somebody a witness had seen. He was associated with a vehicle that was someone had seen with a client of one of the victims. So as they narrowed down the patterns of the cell phones and began looking at where he lived and where he worked, it seemed to all add up.
So I understand too that since his arrest, the police have really been flooded with information. They've searched a storage unit that he owned. They've made quite a few other discoveries, have they not?
There have been. When he was arrested and when there was enough information about him, people did start calling the police to tell them more information. And so they're building quite a substantial case against him now. They also have physical evidence. They have hair from his wife that were in with 3 of the victims. So that helped to get a warrant for his arrest. The DNA from that hair matched his wife. So the suggestion is that either he had transfer evidence from his clothing to the victims, or potentially he murdered them in his home. He seemed to have murdered them when his wife and daughter were traveling, so he had the home to himself, but that helped to make the case against him.
That's extraordinary. You know, in your experience, how common, he was an architect, reportedly running a very, competent business in New York. How hard is it to lead a double life like this?
It depends on the person. They figure out what's the best way to get away with things. He was a fairly organized person, so he could do these things when his wife was not around, when his wife and daughter were not around. He found ways to present himself as an ordinary person, an accomplished person. He had ran a fairly good business, so no one would have suspected him. And typically with a double life, they're well aware that their fantasy life, or whatever it is they're planning to do of a criminal nature, is unacceptable to the people close to them. So they find ways to deflect that, to lie, to run deceptions. And people don't normally suspect that somebody they're related to is a serial killer. So that's fairly easy to kind of manipulate their expectations. And they're very good at keeping their secrets and hiding the evidence. And he seemed to, he was a gun fanatic. So he had over 200 guns in a sealed vault. Possibly he had evidence stored somewhere else. So he knew how to have secrets. He knew how to protect those secrets. And the people closest to him were taken by surprise.
Yeah. Apparently, reportedly, his only question when he was arrested was, is it in the news? Which is interesting. I mean, is it common that sometimes these killers are looking for notoriety? They want to know that they're making a mark.
I think when he asked, is it in the news, it wasn't really about ego or notoriety. because there's been no evidence of him paying attention to the news, asking about it, wanting to see coverage. And that's behavior that undercuts the notion that he's really looking for notoriety. I think he asked if this is going to be in the news because he was worried about his family seeing it, his brother seeing it, people he knew, his customers seeing it. I think he was more concerned about the fact that people were going to hear this, and not really about trying to inflate his ego with it.
That is interesting. There was other evidence that's come forward that after he had murdered one of the girls, he rang the victims' families, taunting them with very nasty messages. How unusual would that be?
It is unusual for killers to call their victims. We certainly have cases of it. In part, it's because they want to relive the sense of power they had from the things that they did to the victim. And they relive that through hearing the pain of the people who loved them. And it's also about kind of strutting and showing, I did this, I'm the one who did this, and you don't know who I am. So it's kind of a show-off thing. But mostly it's simply to re-experience what they had done.
Yeah. Do you think it's likely, I mean, the fact that some of these bodies were found and then more were uncovered, that he may be responsible for more of these crimes?
Well, I think it's certainly more likely than not. It's hard to say because the four were placed in such a way. They were all placed within about a quarter of a mile of each other. Three were wrapped in burlap. It's very orderly. So it doesn't appear to be related to the other victims who were found about 3 miles away. Some of those were dismembered. One was a child with a mother. Another was a male. So trying to link him up to those, I think, is going to be a lot more challenging. Did he do something before? Possibly. We know that he's being investigated in other states, in Las Vegas and in South Carolina, because he owns property in South Carolina that would have be easy as a place to bury bodies. So I'm sure that they're investigating that right now.